Now, photography isn't a popularity contest, but when the going is good and you have an opportunity, you're probably gonna take it. Now, I might have given in to the TikTok dancers and all the social media peer pressure, and I picked up a Fuji X100VI. I'm not even gonna try to get the X100V after all of the virality and pretty much not be able to get this camera anywhere, but I ended up getting this on a one-day turnaround. But before I want to talk about this camera, I wanted to make sure that I filled one 120GB card. And here's my first 1,000 photos on the Fuji X100VI. We'll get there. Now, there's really nothing to disclose. I don't think I deserve a cookie for telling you that I bought this with my own money, but I bought this with my own money. I do borrow Fuji cameras, but honestly, I don't really make videos on the cameras that I do borrow, which actually might make Fuji mad, but who really cares? Let's talk about the camera. But one of the reasons why I got one of these cameras is honestly gonna be the aesthetics. The less I care about freelance work, the more I'm going into the aesthetics of some of the cameras that I do pick up. I obviously have cameras that are workhorses. There's Sony cameras and Lumix cameras, and even my Ursa 12K are gonna be workhorse cameras. But sometimes when you wanna mix in a little bit of fashion and style to some of the tools that you use, myself and other people like to customize their Fuji camera because it has a bit of personality. And honestly, it's kind of like wearing those armbands in football where if you look good, you'll play good. And if you play good, well, you're gonna get a better result. Now, speaking of results, I want to talk about the photos, and I actually did split these up into 3 distinct categories between street photography, behind the scenes, everyday life stuff, and as well as doing the most basic thing that you can do, especially when you're shooting on your camera, is well, go to your local state fair, or in this part, the X. Now, during the pandemic, I used to play this game called Shoot Until It Dies, which is kind of a morbid name, but basically the rules were pretty simple. I had one battery, one SD card, and I had to go out and shoot photos, and I wasn't allowed to come home until either the battery died or the card filled. In this scenario, I actually picked both of them. The battery died and the card filled. But taking my first 1,000 photos, a big chunk of that was actually going to be taking photos in the city that I live in. In 2025, I've done a lot of traveling trips where I've taken my GFX 50R in order to take photos, and I've gotten really, really good stuff. Now, my Fuji X100VI is definitely no slouch. You're still going to be able to get that 23, which is kind of like a 35mm f2 lens, which also is, I guess, an equivalent of an f2.8 lens, which is incredibly sharp with that 40 megapixel sensor, but also at the same time, the photos objectively look good. Something that I think a lot of us can agree on is that Fuji makes incredibly good crop sensor cameras. APS-C doesn't feel like it's much of a hindrance, especially coming from somebody who has a medium format photography camera. It's just a little bit different. Your depth of field is going to be a little bit less. Having a smaller sensor is going to come with not getting as good of low light, although when we go some of the images later on, they still look pretty good, especially when most social media platforms compress stuff so you don't ever see any noise in it. With that sensor as well, it's actually gonna have 40 megapixels, which is a little bit higher than some of the other Fuji X100 cameras. Now, where that seems to shine is your ability to crop in. Now, in that Shoot Until It Dies game, it was mostly a street photography game, but I find that the majority of the photos that I take is more like urban landscape than street photography. I don't really like taking pictures of unsuspecting people. However, one of the things I like to do sometimes is reframe my image, especially if I don't have a longer lens, because, well, the X100VI doesn't have a longer lens. And because it has a higher megapixel sensor, the images are still going to be sharp, which is something that wasn't necessarily as common on some lower megapixel sensors. So in the pinch when you do need that, when you do need to recompose, instead of zooming it in on post, especially if you're only going to shoot to JPEGs, which every single photo in this video is all JPEGs, well, then you could just use that crop option. Now, one of the most basic places that you can take your camera, especially something like an X100VI, is going to be to your state fair or your county fair or the exhibition if you're in Toronto, Canada, or the X is what we actually call it. Now, one of the things I liked about shooting photos at the X is the variety of different colors and situations and different compositions that you can get, especially when there's just so much going on. There's theme park rides, there's little vendors where you can get food at, there's little activations that are going on throughout the exhibition, and it gives you an ability to actually see what kind of colors you can get right out of camera. Like I mentioned before, everything else on here are going to be JPEG images, so for the most part, this is exactly what it looked like while I was in camera. And if you don't know this, because maybe you're late to the game on Fuji cameras, but you can customize your settings using different film sims, and you could actually tweak those things, which most people would call a Fuji recipe. Now, there's a variety of ways that you could find different settings, and I'm going to put mine on the screen because I shot all 1,000 photos with this. but the ability to use recipes gives you something that looks really good right out of camera, depending on your style. Now, the reason why I wanted to use this camera is also because it's going to be a bit more inconspicuous. If you live in a big city like Toronto, bringing a big camera like this medium format interchangeable lens camera is going to get you kicked out of some places. And that's kind of the reason why I got the X100VI. Typically, if you're going to any sporting event, if you're going to concerts and things like that, this camera, because you can't take the lens off, actually might get you through in some places. Also, when you're going to a gigantic carnival with hundreds of people, it's probably best that you don't bring a giant medium format and start pointing it around before you attract some unnecessary attention. But using something small like an X100VI, despite the fact that my hands are just really big, you're able to use this camera and be a bit more unobtrusive, which is a word that I think I made up, but I think it might be in the dictionary. We don't know. There's also something to be said about a camera that's just meant for documenting. While doing this whole YouTube thing a bit more full-time and actually slowing down some freelance work because I think I kind of like doing this a little bit more, some things that I like doing is being able to document the stuff that I'm doing. Currently, right now, I'm working on a couple of documentary films that are important to me, or sometimes I'm working on a particular job where I want to take a camera out and just get a couple of BTS photos, or I'm just taking really mediocre everyday photos and I just want to have those. Using something like the Fuji X100VI doesn't make me think about the professionalism of things, and I feel like a lot of people feel that with some of the cameras that they have. These photos are mostly going to be in YouTube videos or on Instagram. I don't feel like printing any of these out. I do feel like printing out a particular photo on the GFX50R that I won a competition with, but one of the things that I don't really care about is putting these photos up on my wall. But I do care about keeping them on my phone and keeping memories and maybe making a social post every now and again. Because doing this whole YouTube thing has given the opportunities to work on more personal projects and travel or just take photos of your friends and loved ones, I kind of like the fact that it's small, it's compact, and also I could put it in like one of my little sweater pockets. Like, watch this for a second. Like, I could just do this. I still look like an idiot when I walk around with it, and it protrudes a little bit outside of my sweater, but at the same time, I guess it's a pocketable camera when you take off the lens hood. Now, another thing that doesn't get mentioned that much on the Fuji X100VI is the fact that it does shoot in 6K video. Now, keep in mind it's going to be a crop, so you're going to have a crop on top of the crop factor onto there. The autofocus is not the greatest in the world, but also if you're in a pinch or maybe you just want to bring this one camera with you and keep it in a small bag, you can get a bunch of video in 6K, you can get it in 10-bit, and it also has F-Log as well. I'm gonna say F-Log just sounds like a really weird word to say because if you take the dash out, it sounds like a different word. But anyways, one of the things I noticed about this camera, one of the things I did notice about F-Log, and I think because it's like F-Log 1 and not F-Log 2, I don't really know. I don't really edit a lot of Fuji stuff, is I'm gonna have to do a little bit of tweaking if I wanna get the video right. That being said, those are my first impressions of the Fuji X100VI. I gave into the peer pressure, and finally, I got a poor man's Leica Q2. This one I could actually afford. Leica's way too much money for me. Now, in terms of fitting into the workflow with the GFX50R versus my X100VI, it's just gonna be situational. When I wanna be more conspicuous or I don't wanna piss off airline security, I'm probably gonna bring one of these in a hybrid camera to get video. Now, if I'm going on a trip where I know that I'm gonna get a lot of photos that I really, really want to keep or maybe print out later on, well, then I'm gonna bring the GFX50R. Now, if you guys want to see a comparison between the two, which you're probably going to ask about an APS-C versus a medium format, leave a comment down below. But one thing I do want to talk about is where I got all the stuff for this camera, which is probably going to be the next video. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you're someone who has an X100VI, sound off in the comment section because I guess now I'm a full Fuji person, I guess. I don't know. I have two cameras, but I'll see you in the next one. See you later.